couple of days, about 3 days later. Do you think it was the same engine that had the feather? Because
I have no idea.
Yeah.
All I know is whatever this might have been planned for my pilot, it got onto the back burner, and he was worried about himself and the commander, you know, of the air base was worried about himself as much as my pilot, because he had to explain that airplane coming down. So, you know, I didn't go through all of this in my head at the time, but I did later on.
Okay. It kind of brings me, you know, as an engineer, the flight engineer, when the plane was, because I talk about this when I give tours about my thinking, as a flight engineer, part of your job is when they start up the engine, you're kind of focusing on all those engine gauges, you know, to make sure they're within the green and none of them are out of the yellow or red zone. Is that kind of what you were looking at when you were watching all that? So that's why you knew that you know, the part of testing that was to make sure that if both magnetos are working properly and you shut one off, that means you're shutting off one of the, and so the RPMs should go down.
Yes.
And if they don't go down, that means you got one that's not even working anyway.
It means you're running your RPM higher in order to get with your hand accelerator. You call it an accelerator if you want to, but it's
but that means you're only running on one spark plug.
Yeah, and you
really need both spark plugs.
And you have to give it more fuel in order to get that RPM up there.
Right. So you'll end up using up fuel quicker than you should. Okay.
Well, I don't know how serious that was, and I still don't. But I mean, for a practice mission, on a bombing mission, we would have probably turned around and parked it. So, but that's what our pilot did. But the thing that impressed me is that he didn't know me from anybody else for about a week before that.
Okay. But he trusted you. Trusted your judgment.
And he took my judgment, yes.
Advisement, yeah. Because they don't know anything about that stuff.
Well,
they know to pull the stick back and it goes. I'm joking about that, but I mean, yeah. They rely on each crew member. They rely on each crew member for their expertise.
That's what he was telling me. Yeah.
So that's good. That's really good.
And here he was a second lieutenant, and I was only a sergeant, you know.
Okay.
Anyhow.
All right. Anyway. All right. So how long were you at? This is at Grand or Sioux City. And how long were y'all there?
I'm guessing a couple of months.
Okay.
I don't know exactly. When it was all over, we went to Lincoln, Nebraska as a crew, and there were other crews that were graduating from Sioux City at the same time, you know.
Right.
And we got an airplane assigned to us and our overseas equipment. You know, the dress, your combat flying gear, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
I do remember that we got our Colt 45s, and the guy that was giving it to us says, "Here's your Colt 45, and the bullets will go in it. That's your airplane." And you got to guard that until you take it back over to overseas.
Okay.
This kind of threw us a little bit, but because we were trying to have a happy time before we left the United States, and somebody had to stay and sit on that airplane.
All right. They got to get you to that serious mode now.
Yeah, it's a 24-hour guard.
You got to start getting serious about what we're doing.
The rest of the crew could go and have a good time there in Lincoln, but that's just one of the things that sits in my head.
Okay.
We flew from Lincoln to someplace in New Hampshire, I think. It might have been Greene. We went to Newfoundland. It's called Goose Bay.
Okay.
And then to Iceland. And each time for a refueling stop.
Okay. Do you remember the date again? when you left Lincoln?
Not exactly, but I think that it was one of the last days in November.
Okay.
Because we got to England in one of the first days in December.
Okay. In other words, did you get Thanksgiving at Lincoln and then left, or was it around Thanksgiving time? Did you remember?
Yes, it was after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you get into when you went from Iceland. Where did you go to from Iceland going into England? Where did you first land?
Well, it was in Wales. There was an island off of Wales called Hawley.
Okay.
And when we landed there, it was like a whole city of B-17 tails sticking up in the air as far as you can see. Where they had just a whole lot of airplanes waiting to be assigned to some group or other. And ours was just put in one of the stalls there. And
Okay.
we took our stuff off.
Was your plane painted silver, or still silver? Was it all
Yes.
aluminum? It was unpainted aluminum? Okay.
They quit painting them. I don't know just when, but I think the F models were painted
Yes, sir.
olive drab.
Right.
Ours wasn't painted at all, so.
That's right. Yeah, they stopped painting in a waste of paint, waste of money,
Well,
extra weight, kind of a deal.
well, that's all part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's- If
But
you
they didn't
need,
need to be camouflaged on the ground anymore because the Luftwaffe was done with. That was kind of my understanding. Part of that.
the Luftwaffe wasn't done with us until the middle of December,
Okay.
and that was before I started flying combat missions.
Okay.
So in our combat missions, our crew was never attacked by fighters.
Okay. Pretty lucky you got.
Now I think that our group was once a time or two when our plane was not flying on a mission
Okay.
there, you know.
All right. So December '44, you're now at Nettishaw.
Well, from Wales we went to a kind of a staging area at a place called Stoke-on-Trent, which is kind of southeast of Liverpool, and it was a British collection point of some kind, and there we were assigned to Thetford, or to Nettishaw, and so I went there on a train. So, and I do remember that we ended up and got off the train at Thetford, and it was in the middle of the night. It must have been midnight, but they were expecting us, and they had a truck there to take us
Okay.
out to the air base.
And
which
how many
was,
crews was that? Was it just your one crew, or there were multiple crews?
There was just one crew with
Okay.
us at that time. I mean,
Right.
we were the only ones.
Okay. So that new plane you flew into England, it stayed behind. In other words.
Yeah, it's still parked.
Yeah.
It was still parked there. There were a lot of them lined up ahead of time to go someplace else. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So then, in the middle of the night, you made it at Nettishaw.
Yeah, and it was dark. There was no lights. Didn't have any lights on anything, and it was fog, and you could hold up the hand in front of your face and not see it. We thought that was a kind of a bad place to be, but
Yes.
there we were. We were put in I think it was probably a military police guest barracks for people like us. They had some
Okay.
extra room. They could take a crew or two that came in the middle of the night,
Okay.
because they didn't want to assign us to a place. I'm thinking this is the way it was. They didn't want to assign to us to a place in the middle of the night where we would go and wake up everybody else in the barracks that had to get their sleep because they're going to go out on a bombing mission tomorrow.
All right.
So, you
Yeah,
know,
you got to get your crew rest. That's pretty
So-
smart thinking.
well, that's
Very good thinking.
that's why we were put in that one
Okay.
place, I think.
Yeah,
But
cool.
the next day we were assigned to this 560th Squadron,
Okay.
and so we found out where our home was, and it was a kind of a Quonset hut, or I didn't call it that.
Were they Nissen?
Nissen hut, they
Nissen
call it.
huts.
It was
Yeah.
more of a house type construction rather than corrugated metal.
Okay.
And there was probably half a dozen crews in there. I never really counted how many. I'm talking about enlisted men now.
Right. Right.
Like a half a dozen crews in there, and then there may be a couple of extra beds and somebody else. There's a few people always hanging around that were not assigned to a crew. They were kind of waiting their time to get back home, and they had 1 or 2 missions left to do before they got their full quota
Okay.
to go back home, you know. So that's where we were when we first landed in Netishall, and that would have been in the first week of December.
Okay.
We didn't fly in combat until about the 5th of January. I think was our first flight.
Okay. Do you remember how many training missions you had during December?
No, but we had several.
Yeah.
I mean, quite a few, maybe every second or third day.
Okay. All right.
I do remember that we had a fire in one of the engines on one of those, and we were probably at an altitude of 10 or 12,000 feet, and so we dived. We feathered the engine, and cut off the fuel, and dived, and the fire went out. And I say that was important because we didn't have a lot of diving space.
Right. Yeah. 14,000 feet. That's not a whole lot.
Well,
of
we
space.
weren't that high. We were less than
Oh,
that.
that's right. Yeah, you're about what? About 5,000, 6,000.
Well, 5 or 10, but
Yeah.
anyhow.
Not a lot of real estate between.
Yes.
Not a lot of air between real
Yes.
estate and you. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. So we got that. All right. So that was. You said was it February or no January 5th? Does that sound about right? Your first combat mission?
Yes.
Okay.
Somebody told us, and I think it might have been our first sergeant for the 560th, that we weren't flying yet because the colonel did not have people flying combat missions unless they were at least a sergeant. I don't know whether that was part of the 8th Air Force or what he was doing, and we weren't. I was a corporal, and I think and radio operator was a corporal, and the rest of them were PFCs.
Whoa.
And the first sergeant said that we missed the promotion date for the group by about 1 day, and so we had to wait another 2 weeks before we get a promotion.
Okay.
At the end of that 2 weeks, which would be in the middle of December, I was promoted to a sergeant, and my radio operator, and the rest of them were promoted to corporals.
Okay.
But we're still not a combat crew.
Because you're still not all sergeants. Okay.
So we had to wait until the 1st of January
Okay.
when we got into another promotion date, and I was made a staff sergeant and the radio operator, and the rest of the crew became buck sergeants.
All right.
So
And you're getting ranked pretty fast. In a month, you went up 2 ranks.
Yes.
That's pretty good living.
Well, I didn't have time to put the proper stripes on my shoulder there, so people could recognize me for such.
Okay. All right, so now you're staff sergeant. Radio guy's a staff sergeant.
Yes.
And your 2 waist gunners and tail gunner and bolter, they're all buck sergeants.
Yes.
Okay. Still got a second lieutenant for captain or for the pilot? Or did he get promoted to first lieutenant?
He did. He was a second lieutenant.
All right.
Co-pilot was a second lieutenant.